Hello, Mary.
All right.
That's great.
I figure it's time to get loud about school food.
That's a good one.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Really happy that you're here. We did have a little bit of a conversation yesterday to prepare for this, and I think you're in for a great session. But you know, I'm not biased. I'm Mary McKenna. I'm a professor at the University of New-Brunswick, and I'm the researcher in residence for Food for All NB for school food. I really want to commend Food for All NB for organizing this session, and there's another session tomorrow on school food. We are at a very important time for school food programs in the province and in the country. We have a government provincially that has promised funding for school food, and we have a commitment from the new Liberal government to in its third mandate to commit to school food programs at a national level. So very important. For those of you who weren't able to make the earlier sessions, it has proved very excellent planning on the part of Food for All, because we heard from Imelda Purley, an inspirational elder in the province, about the reverence and honoring food that we eat. And then we heard a very compelling session, and disturbing actually, about the high numbers of children who are in poverty in New Brunswick and who continue to use the food banks. So here we are now to talk about school food in particular. And we have a wonderful panel ranging from international to regional. And so I'm going to stop talking almost, and so that they can get started. So I just want to say that we are going to save questions for the end. If you have a question or comment that you want to put in the chat, you're welcome to do so. They can be in French and English. If you, cette session, ça va être en anglais, mais si vous avez besoin de traduction, il y a un bouton at the bottom. Mon français, je pratique. So you're free to do that. I also want to acknowledge the land acknowledgement for the University of New Brunswick, which is on the Wolastoqey Maliseet people's unceded territory through friendship treaties. So we're going to start with Debbie Field, and I'm trying to be very use less paper. So Debbie's introduction is on my phone, so pardon me for reading and it's kind of squinting here. So Debbie, who is a friend and colleague and inspirational in all of this, has been involved in promoting and improving school food programs for decades, and that's not supposed to make us feel old, Debbie. It's just supposed to recognize and honor what we've done. Starting when she was a child growing up in New York City, where she participated in a free lunch program and loved the mashed potatoes and meatloaf, but hated the stigma of eating in the free lunch cafeteria. When Debbie's children entered grade school, she was instrumental as a parent, activist, in organizing a healthy hot lunch program at her children's school, and then advocating to the City of Toronto to fund student nutrition programs. And over her years as the executive director of Food Share Toronto, she and her colleagues were involved in developing innovative and sustainable student nutrition, school food literacy programs, and the creation of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which now Debbie heads, and under Debbie's leadership has grown, I would say, exponentially. So over to you, Debbie.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. It's pretty exciting that we're able to visit across so much geography through these miracles of technology. So I was saying all morning, I'm going to be in New Brunswick, and I really feel like I'm there. And I have had the great pleasure of traveling to New Brunswick and meeting with many of you who are on the call, or some of you who are on the call. It is really, as Mary said, an exciting moment. So I am the coordinator of this great national coalition. I actually am joining from the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and and the Anishinaabe nations who were governed here in Toronto by Treaty 13 and multiple treaties through the Williams Treaty with the Mississaugas and the Chippewa bands. And our members in the coalition actually are all across the country, and there's 178 member organizations today. And in New Brunswick, we are, of course, really, really pleased to have had two groups who were there with us in our founding meeting, which was in Halifax in 2014, Nourishing Minds New Brunswick and the Réseau. And then there are three other members, including a couple who are on the panel here. I think we're going to be seeing a lot, hopefully, of more members joining in New Brunswick through this whole process. And so I look forward to that. We also have 44 endorsers, including health units. Many cities have endorsed, city of Vancouver, Victoria, Toronto, several other cities across the country. And we're thousands of experienced and passionate community-based activists. We've created in our membership, thousands and thousands of programs across the country. And we're also national health organizations and provincial Indigenous education and philanthropic organizations. So a lot of us, and nonpartisanly, we are gathered to build this movement for school food. It is, I want to say, first and foremost, an amazing moment right now in the world, actually. More even than in Canada. There is, I hope afterwards, you'll get copies of the slide. So I hope you go, and I've put the link there so you can see it. It has a slightly unfortunate name because it's a little bit too much like our coalition name. It is the School Meals Coalition. And it was only founded about 6 months ago. So it's basically a global movement that includes multiple countries and multiple partners. Unfortunately, Canada has yet to sign on as a country, and that's very, very distressing. And their goals are to, it was led by a lot of World Food Organizations going to governments, to Finland and France first, actually. And then now there are over 51 countries, including Honduras and the United States, France, Germany, all the G7 countries. And their goals are very clear and probably are shared by all of us on the call. By the year 2023, bring back all school food programs to pre-COVID levels. Because of course you realize that how long it's going to be in Canada before we can even bring ourselves back to pre-COVID levels. I can't imagine what it's going to take to do that because COVID has shut down so many school food programs. And around the world, they're committed to every child every day having at least one healthy meal. And it is such a great vision. And it, of course, is so aligned, as I've said, with our vision here today. In Canada, also big news, and Mary's already talked about it, and I'm hoping we'll talk more about it. So after really decades of many of us working towards this goal, we finally get a commitment, financial commitment of $1 billion over 4 years, over 5 years. The NDP had pledged $1 billion over 4 years. And I think Mary and the two Rachels from the Réseau were at a meeting in Halifax when we actually did say, this was the coalition's words, $1 billion over 5 years. Of course, with inflation, it isn't what it was then. But nevertheless, we really are hoping that there will be $200 million in budget 2022 in March. And there was also, besides the NDP commitment, a very important commitment from the Bloc Québécois, which was the first time that they have ever said that they support school food programs and they want transfer payments. And I think as you do more and more advocacy work with Conservatives in your province, you will probably see that that's the language that will work with the Conservatives. And it is a great big moment for you in New Brunswick. As Mary has said, this meeting today, I'm sure we'll all look back and say, I was there at that meeting that launched so much work after New Brunswick being the last province or territory to come in with a financial commitment. You're there, and you have been leaders for decades in many programs. The Rousseau, many programs in your First Nations have been celebrated across the country. Your First Nation schools have been celebrated across the country as innovative, and you are on this call going to hear so much more after I stop in a few minutes about what's going on in New Brunswick. So why are we here? I mean, you all know this. We have this dual problem. All children, regardless of their parents' income, have trouble accessing nutritious food. And this has gotten so much work just during COVID. I am just distraught thinking about the eating habits of children during COVID and what's happened, and the amount of junk food and the amount of extra sitting around at home because of not having a school food program. And we have low food literacy rates, and you're going to hear much more about this from Jesse. And I actually don't believe children can grow into healthy adults unless they are taught food literacy. And the school needs to be an important part of this. And these two twin problems are causing a massive crisis for our children. And again, you know this. We believe, I think, on this call, and that school food programs are a very important solution to these massive problems. And we know that school food programs have so many benefits. And again, I don't have to tell you the educational and health benefits of a good school food program. Mary mentioned this very difficult situation we're living through right now with increased poverty and increased food bank use and increased struggle on the family budget. In our coalition, we do not think that a school food program is an exchange for welfare reform or adequate minimum wage or adequate incomes. And we think it's very important that we not hear that, oh, well, we don't have adequate income, but the children are fed at school. We think that will be a disaster in terms of how the program rolls out. At the same time, we know from low-income parents how important a quality, unstigmatized school food program can be for them. And we believe that a good school food program can support the local economy and help meet targets that we're very worried about right now in terms of climate. And we think they're very important. They play an important role for families and particularly women. Canada has, unfortunately, not a harmonized national school food program. This is, I think, a map that Mary might have developed, which gives us a sense of the hodgepodge we have across the country. Good news is we've done a lot at the grassroots level. We're poised to do a lot more with national money and national standards. Mary and Amberly Roots have just published a paper, which we will have to make sure to circulate to everybody, that gives us some of the baseline of where we were before the pandemic, either 1 million or 2 million kids participating, and maybe 30 to 35% of schools. But like I say, with COVID, I'm very worried. I've seen devastating shutdown of programs because of COVID, and not all communities have responded as well. You've had some great innovation in some of your communities with good food boxes and other programs, but almost all the programs have been stigmatized, which have brought back another set of problems. The other thing that's very interesting is we don't really know, but my own intuitive feeling is the programs are even more widespread in Indigenous communities for a variety of reasons. That certainly may be true in New Brunswick. So as we move forward, oops, sorry, need to go back. I wanted to show you this slide for just a minute. As we have developed our coalition, we've thought it's very important to come up with some principles. So these are our principles. In many ways, they could be recommendations to the government. So for us, primarily, as I've said, this is about health promotion and all children needing access to healthy food at school. We believe it should be cost shared between the provinces and the territories and maybe cities. And potentially with parents. There's some very interesting things happening in PEI right now with a cost shared model that does not stigmatize children. That's a universal lunch program. That's a conversation we need to have. We're very concerned that it not be cost shared with the private sector food companies. Some of you might have heard a very disturbing recent donation, not just of money, but product, Danone yogurt. Which may or may not be what we want to build our school food program around. But Our coalition is very worried about corporate food and corporate money in what should be a universal school food program funded by mostly the public sector. We know that at the community level, many of us raise money from the dry cleaners and other private sector companies, but there's very bad evidence from the privatization of school food programs in France and Italy that have destroyed the programs by having lower cost caterers. There's very big concerns about junk food advertising and corporate food and packaged food to our children. So this is, I think, a big problem for us in the next while. Our coalition believes that programs need to be universal, and that's going to be quite complicated because in the 200 million isn't enough for a full universal program. But we think in wherever there is funding, at least the children in that cohort, in that class or that school need to have universal access. We think there has to be a flexible food service model, not breakfast, lunch, or snack, because many of us are doing different things across the country. We think programs need to be connected to their local community, comprehensive when possible, locally procured when possible, and we are very, very concerned there be Indigenous control over Indigenous school food programs and that we need national standards. So what now? We have a great moment to keep doing what we've been doing, which is continued membership building, continual provincial and territorial advocacy. There's going to be 3 or 4 election campaigns in 2022, and people are getting active in our Quebec chapter and in Ontario to intervene in that election. So we're hoping that in New Brunswick you join with very active chapters, or in Quebec they call it the collectif, and in Nova Scotia they're calling it School Food Advisory. There's one in Manitoba and Saskatchewan too. And we hope that you get involved in all the activities that the coalition is promoting. We have 3 things that we work on. Federal advocacy, which I think you get the idea. We've been hopefully doing a lot of this for a long time, but we understand that nothing will happen unless we are very active at the provincial and territorial level, because we have to ensure that our provinces and territories accept the money quickly. We don't want to spend 20 years like the childcare community has between a federal, provincial, jurisdictional fight. We've done a great webinar a few weeks ago on Germany. Germany has as complicated jurisdictional issues between their federal government and their national states, and yet they have figured out how to have a harmonized program. And we're very involved in knowledge sharing. And in that way, I just want to let you know that tomorrow we have this very exciting panel. And if any of you want to email me, I can send you the link. This is going to launch our annual planning meeting, which, you guys are going to be involved in your conference all tomorrow morning. So I can't imagine you're going to have the time and strength to come in the afternoon. I know that a couple of the coalition members will be joining for our planning meeting, which will happen later on in the afternoon. But this panel is 1 to 2 p.m. your time. And I just want to draw your attention to the speakers because it gives you a sense of what's happening in Canada. Courtney Wheaton is from Yukon First Nations Educational Secretariat. They have negotiated a most amazing Indigenous-led school food program, well-funded through federal funding, because I think you know that Indigenous schools are 100% funded by the federal government and therefore need to negotiate a separate, whatever the $1 billion they've put in the budget for us. There needs to be additional funds for Indigenous schools. Heather Mullen is going to talk about the amazing process in PEI where they have convinced their government to commit to a universal school food program at the provincial level. And Dr. Donald Bundy, who's connected to this world movement that I've mentioned to you and is a totally inspirational speaker. Donald Bundy says all countries in the world now have a public school system and they know the importance of a public education system. All countries need to have a quality school food program. So it's been a really great pleasure to talk to you. I really look forward to the conversation. I know New Brunswick is poised to get much more active in school food, and it will be great.
All right. Thank you so much, Debbie. And you can see from Debbie's presentation, there's so much, each of those slides you could probably spend another 20 minutes on. So I really appreciate the condensing all of that information and inspiration into such a short time. we're going to move on to Jessie Veenstra. And Jessie is a public health professional with a passion, gosh, I'm going to just take my glasses off, with a passion for food security and community funding. Prior to joining Farm to Cafeteria Canada in 2018, she spent a decade managing complex projects across the continuum of care at Vancouver Council, Coastal Health, and at BC's Provincial Health Services Authority. From 2017 to 2021, Jessie served 2 terms on the Vancouver Food Policy Council. And if you've not been involved with that or heard about it, they do amazing work, and it's a very diverse group as well. And she was a member of the council's leadership team, as well as working groups on food justice and zero waste. Jessie holds a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition and Nutraceutical Science, Masters of Science in Human Health and Nutrition. In Jessie's spare time, you will find her exploring the BC wilderness, hopefully not needing a boat these days. We hope that things improve soon in BC, experimenting in her garden or getting creative in her kitchen with the local bounty BC has to offer. So Jessie, we're thrilled. New Brunswick has been an active farm to cafeteria province, and we're very happy to hear from you today.
Thanks so much, Mary, for the intro, and I'll just start to present my slides here and hope that you can see them. Do I need to share my screen? Or is it automatically? Hang on one sec, sorry. While I'm doing that, I will just say that, yeah, yes, absolutely. New Brunswick has been a founding partner, actually, in our chair. Roxana Atkinson, who some of you may know, is based in New Brunswick. I just need to, sorry, just one second. I might have to try and share here. Let me know if this works or if you see my speaker notes.
We see presenter view. Oh, we see your speaker notes at the moment.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm gonna stop share. Sorry, I clicked the wrong window, and I'll just try this again.
I don't think as many times as I present, I don't think I'll ever remember which window to click.
I think it was because I started presenting before I shared my screen, and I think the trick is to do it beforehand, so apologies.
And I'll just, while we're waiting, give a reminder that please feel free to put questions. Alicia is monitoring the chat, and to put questions or comments for our presenters.
Here we go. You know what? I'm just going to not do the presenter view, and I will just do a good old-fashioned present, and hopefully that will work. Go. Sorry, everybody.
Jessie, we are in our last session talking about standing in solidarity through all of our technical issues and solutions. So you do what you need to get your presentation up.
Okay, sounds good. I think it should be coming up now. It's just being a little slow to load. There we go. Can you see it now?
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks everybody for the invitation to build on Debbie's presentation and get loud specifically around farm to school. I want to first just start by saying that I'm joining today from the ancestral and unceded lands of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, in what is otherwise known as Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I apologize too, because if you can see me, I'm looking at a different screen, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to start just by giving a bit of an introduction to Farm to Cafeteria Canada. Some of you may be familiar with our work, and if you are, maybe a refresher for those that are new, welcome. We are a partnership-based organization with a common vision for vibrant, sustainable local food systems that support the health of people, place, and planet. And the way that we work is along with our partners, which includes partners at the federal, provincial, territorial, and even local levels, ultimately to build capacity in communities to bring healthy local food into public institutions. And that work primarily focuses in the K-12 school setting. And so we do a lot of work around granting, knowledge translation, as well as evaluation, which I'll talk a bit more about. And of course, our partners in the province of New Brunswick, our core partner is the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries. And so they work to help provide regional level coordination of farm to school activities in the province. And then we work with them and a number of other regional partners to coordinate that activity nationally. And shout out to, I'm not sure if Melanie Cormier is on the call, but if folks know Melanie, she is our regional lead for the province of New Brunswick. And so the title of my presentation is Loud About Farm to School. And so I always like to just start by grounding us in what we mean when we say the term farm to school. And so here at Farm to Cafeteria Canada, this plate puzzle piece diagram that you see is what we refer to as the farm to school approach. And really it's these three kind of interconnected elements that work together. And it's ultimately providing a lens or an approach to school food that is more than about just what students have to eat at school. That's part of it, but it also includes hands-on learning and connections to the community. And so this is an approach that's really flexible across communities, allows to kind of reflect the local context, but no matter where programs are situated, it has these three elements. And when I talk about it being flexible, I should also note that the term local food to school can also be used interchangeably. We realize that we refer to it as farm to school, but acknowledge that food systems are really diverse and sometimes include farms and seas and lakes and forests. And so it's not necessarily just farms. And so we encourage communities to use whichever terminology best resonates for them. And this is a companion graphic that we just recently developed, and it's just kind of building on some of what I just spoke to, kind of showing the different ways that farm to school can come, or some of the different ways that farm to school can come to life in communities. So we've actually had a lot of interest recently around Sea to School. We hosted a webinar last spring on Sea to School, and one of our grant recipient schools in New Brunswick actually just went out and did an ocean field trip with Fishing for Success, if folks know that. So there's been a lot of buzz around that. The work that we do, I won't go into too much detail here, but ultimately we provide grants, which I'm going to be providing some more information about, but facilitate training opportunities for knowledge exchange, both at regional and national levels, sharing of stories of schools, as well as evaluation and mapping of farm to school activity happening across the country. So what this looks like in terms of the schools that we've worked with directly, this map represents our grant recipients since 2016. We've been working with the Whole Kids Foundation to provide grants every 2 years of up to $10,000 for schools to implement demonstration projects that embrace a farm to school approach. So really central to them is a food service. Typically it's been a salad bar in the past, but also includes food literacy activities and connections to community partners. And so these numbers that you see on the map are a little bit out of date. The ones along the bottom are up to date, but the green ones aren't quite up to date. And I'll just say that we actually are currently accepting applications for our 2022 grant cycle. So folks that are interested can find information about that on our website. And those are due January 31st. What this looks like in New Brunswick, though. So we've provided grants to 13 schools to date with a total of about $130,000, and we're excited to hopefully welcome some more in this next cohort. And because of the success of these individual programs, a second grant stream that we've been working to build is actually our Learning Circle grants. And so these are more capacity building grants that allow multiple schools and community partners to work together to build capacity within schools to tackle common challenges in the school food system. And so this is something that we're particularly wanting to dive into right now, especially coming out of COVID. We know that there are some challenges, many challenges. Debbie spoke to some of those, and I'll talk a bit more about our experience in a moment. But we're excited to be working with actually Food for All NB to implement a learning circle over about the next 18 months in the southeast of New Brunswick, which is, and some of you on the call might even be involved with, I'm sure. This slide I had mentioned is just a plug for our grant, so folks that are interested can find out the information on our website. But I want to take a minute to just chat a little bit about what we've observed over our last number of years, really intensively, almost going on 6 years now, really intensively facilitating this particular grant program, but working in the farm to school realm for the last 10 years. And some of the factors that we have here might look familiar to some of the guiding principles that Debbie mentioned. And I won't go into detail on all of them, but the part I am going to emphasize is the importance of integration of food literacy. So for us, especially during the pandemic, what we have observed, like Debbie said, we've seen so much fluctuation in terms of food service at schools, and it's really put a spotlight on the importance of school food as an essential service. But I think what we've also seen is just how critical the hands-on food literacy aspect is, and what a loss it's been for schools to not have the ability to implement that. So many aspects of food literacy. And when I say that, we do mean food skills like cooking, preserving, but it also includes overall food systems literacy, getting to know and think critically about where food comes from. It's an opportunity for students to connect to the land, to their community, to understand their responsibility to that, and also how their own health is intertwined with the health of their community and the environment. And I think right now that's so important. And it also provides an opportunity for kids to connect in a coming out of a time that there's been a lot of disconnection. And so the kind of overall benefits for mental health and well-being are quite profound. And so for us, when we look at what does a potential school food program look like nationally, and then rolling down to the local levels, is yes, national guidance, but opportunity for local level implementation. But that engagement of students and integration of food literacy as being really core to it. And what's been possible in the last couple of years has really, it's really varied by region. We see some schools that have had a lot of success adapting or doing at-home activities, or possibly being able to do things at school. And then we see other regions where they can't even have volunteers in school. And of course, it's one of those things that sort of falls off, because often it is very volunteer-led, or it's teachers kind of doing it off the side of their desk and they haven't had that capacity. So for us, it's really important that we recognize the importance of this work and work to ensure that it can be supported. We have paid positions to support food literacy within the school system. And the reasons for that, a big focus for us is evaluation. And so some of the data here I'll just share quickly is to say that we have evaluated over the first 3 years of our project that we're about 4 years into right now, evaluated the first few cycles of our grant recipients. And these are some of the findings that we found. So basically we have a couple of key areas that we're consistently seeing impacts of farm to school, including public health, education and learning, community economic development. Not on here is actually environmental sustainability, and that is the fourth pillar that makes up 4 priority areas of our recently produced evaluation framework for farm to school in Canada. But I have vibrant school communities up here as well, because it did emerge as a core area in our own evaluation. And I would say, you know, it's sort of the thing that it's an opportunity for whole communities to come together is really what farm to school offers, and to get engaged in their school food system and be proud of it and excited about it. And we see that over and over again within schools. And I think that's just something that's really galvanizing and important, especially now as we kind of look to work together more as communities and build our resilience. More stats. These are all available in a variety of sheets on our website, so I won't go into too much detail there. But I will just point to some resources on our website. Again, part of the work we've been doing in the last couple of years is to make resources more digestible and accessible for educators and community partners. So we're constantly improving the resource center on our website, which you can find here. We've recently worked, for instance, with Growing Chefs Ontario, which is a great organization to develop a food literacy video series, 10 videos, 4 of them have been released so far, around teaching the curriculum through food. And appropriately for some of the challenges in COVID, one of the videos is food themed activities without food or tasting, because we know that's been a major challenge for many schools, is actually being able to do food prep, but still being able to integrate that food literacy. So I think in summary, similar to Debbie, some of the learnings and recommendations that we have for school food in Canada is absolutely that it needs guiding standards and national coordination. We're all working towards the same goal. Nobody wants to reinvent the wheel, but at the same time, it's really important that communities have the flexibility to implement that in a way that is meaningful and appropriate in their regions. That programs are available to all and not targeted, that if it isn't clear already, we definitely recommend taking a farm to school approach. So incorporating those community connections and hands-on learning. And then last but not least, that we have a strong framework for monitoring and evaluating. And anybody that is interested in that, we are now rolling out our evaluation framework. So we're working with communities to help them evaluate their programs at a local level. And if anyone's interested in that, I can share some more information. So thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and feel free to contact myself or Melanie in New Brunswick.
All right. Thank you, and great to hear the excitement again around farm to school and farm to cafeteria and all that is happening. So thanks a lot, Jessie. That's wonderful. Now we're going to move a little closer to home in terms of New Brunswick, and Christine Roherty is going to speak with us about a pilot project that occurred last year and through Heart and Stroke Foundation of New Brunswick, which Christine is an employee of. And here's a little bit about Christine. She's a registered dietitian and the vice president of health promotion for Heart and Stroke Foundation of New Brunswick, where she has provided strategic oversight to the programs and services of the foundation for close to 14 years. A member of both the foundation's senior leadership team and government relations team, Christine has led numerous health promotion programs and advocacy work related to the foundation's mission. Christine also sits on the New Brunswick Association of Dietitians Board of Director as the president-elect. Christine will be sharing the outcomes of the 2021 New Brunswick School Food Pilot Project and the Heart and Stroke Foundation of New Brunswick advocacy efforts to bring a provincial school food program to our province. So very welcome, and everybody's excited to hear this, Christine. So thanks very much, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Mary. So I'm just having a moment where I'm trying to put this up in presenter view, and I'm not sure if I'm doing this correctly. I don't know if anybody can provide some technical support. I can certainly, can everyone see the presentation? Yes, okay, I'll just.
Christine, sorry, if you just go into view and reading view, that'll bring it up in full. Reading view.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heather. So, you know, I'm really happy to be here today. I just want to start by saying that, like Mary, I'm coming to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey Maliseet First Nations. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the New Brunswick School Food Pilot results. And as Mary had said, it is a pilot project that we had done in partnership with the Department of Education. And of course, it was a project that included the Department of Social Development and the Department of Health. So it was something that certainly took a lot of effort throughout the pandemic, but we were successful in implementing this pilot project in 19 schools across the province. So before I get into the results, I just want to talk a little bit about the Heart and Stroke Foundation of New Brunswick, because many people say to me, why Heart and Stroke? Why does Heart and Stroke, you know, put a lot of emphasis on school food? And so, you know, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Heart and Stroke Foundation of New Brunswick is a not-for-profit health charity. We are provincially mandated, and our mission is to promote health, save lives, and enhance recovery with respect to healthy lives free of heart disease and stroke. And so when we look at our advocacy around school food programming, was really born from a desire to affect health outcomes in children. And we know that children who have access to and consume healthy foods see improved health indicators, which would decrease their risk for chronic diseases, including heart disease and stroke later in life. And so, you know, for us, our school food programs, we know can dramatically improve access to healthy foods for children and can support a culture of healthy eating among children. So of course, our position statement, and you'll see here, there's many logos from organizations that are here today and that represent many stakeholders within school food programming in New Brunswick, is that New Brunswick needs a comprehensive school food program that's universal, sufficiently funded with resources, staffing, and healthy, nutritious food. And if anyone here is interested in learning more about our advocacy efforts around bringing this kind of a school food program to New Brunswick, I'd be happy to chat with you after the fact. We certainly are greater when our numbers are greater, and it has been many years that New Brunswick has been pushing towards school food programming, and we're starting to see some really great outcomes as a result. So when we look at New Brunswick, we have some of the highest rates of food insecurity. And where I'm originally from, in St. John, New Brunswick, we have some of the highest rates in the country. So some of our statistics are 1 in every 2 children live or come from food insecure households. So it is an issue in New Brunswick, and some areas more so than others. We see high rates of childhood obesity, low testing scores. We're seeing de-skilling of food, nutrition knowledge, limited capacity in schools, calls to action for local foods, and we're seeing a lack of industry knowledge at the school level. So when we work with schools and when we talk to schools, we get a lot of questions like, how do we start a school food program? What should we do? What can we serve? How do we do it? So we're really starting, you know, when we look at New Brunswick, where we want to go is we want to have a program that prioritizes equity among schools, to bring all schools what they need. And so prioritizing healthy foods is another huge priority for a school food program in New Brunswick. A lot of the things that we just heard about from Debbie and Jesse, and that we talk about a lot in these stakeholder engagement sessions, incorporating food literacy, that comes up time and time again, leveraging community resources. And that's really where the sustainability of school food programming comes from, is in the school's ability to understand and access where those resources are within their community. And sometimes they're human resources, sometimes they're funding resources. And so, you know, helping them to identify those community partners, and of course, providing schools with that expertise that would support schools and their champions at the school. And we consider a school champion to be anyone who is leading the school food program. It can be a school administrator, it can be a volunteer, it can be the music teacher. So some schools, depending on what resources they have available to them, that champion is really varied. But we want to help that champion navigate all the aspects of their school food programming. And of course, our goal is to help build a framework that supports schools' autonomy, to build the program that best meets the needs of that school community. There's something that we know about New Brunswick is that every school has a very different level of resources and need. And so bringing that equity to schools, but also allowing the schools the autonomy to move forward in the direction that best meets the needs of their student population. And so this is where we see the program, which is the New Brunswick School Food Pilot Program, was built on these 5 pillars that aim to answer all those questions and support schools in all of those areas. So you'll see here our 5 pillars of a robust school food program is that they address food insecurity, they provide healthy food, they include access to expertise, so whether it be nutrition expertise or other areas that are related to school food programming, foster nutrition literacy at the school, and then facilitate partnerships. So you'll notice in this presentation, there's these little green boxes. So our school food pilot project was evaluated by the Université de Moncton. They have their own evaluation report, which is now available for distribution. And so you'll see these little boxes that I've kind of picked out from the evaluation just to kind of help support some of the results that we're going to talk about today. And so what they've said about these 5 pillars of a robust school food program is that really, we made an effort, heart and stroke, that it was grounded in evidence-based best practice. And so we are using key concepts, and we certainly have an aim to, because this is a framework, to evolve and to move forward with how this looks in the future based on an ever-evolving evaluation framework as well. So getting to the results of the pilot, I just wanted to say that we had 19 schools participate and that 13 of those schools were used in the evaluation. And there's different reasons for that. I don't have enough time to get into it right now, but initially it was just the 13 schools, and then we were able to leverage a bit more money. And so we added in more schools, but it was a little too late for them to be added in for the evaluation with Université de Moncton. That included about 5,000 students in New Brunswick. And it's really important to note that we did take a cross-section of schools, and that cross-section of schools was looked at in terms of all different aspects of whether they had a school food program or whether they didn't have a school food program, large schools, small schools, urban schools, rural schools. And we did review that cross-section of schools at multiple times throughout the process to make sure that we were including all different kinds of schools with different levels and variations within their school food programming. And so what happened was the school food program coordinator worked with each school to support their needs towards a robust school food program. And remember what I said, that robust school food program had the 5 pillars. And so this slide here just talks a little bit about what we had when we started. We had close to 80% who had little to none school food programming or some partial school food program towards a robust program. So they were making some kind of an effort, but they needed a bit more support. And sometimes the support was funding, and sometimes it was expertise and it was guidance, where only about 20% of schools in New Brunswick had what we would consider a robust school food program. And of course, after the pilot, we went to over 84% with a broad comprehensive programming, and only 16% with some or partial. And that is just to explain that some schools need a lot of support, and they were starting from scratch. There were many schools that we had spoken to who really didn't know where to even start. We had one school in particular that didn't have any programming whatsoever, and now they're in the broad comprehensive section. So really happy to say that that was one of the results of the pilot project. So examples of programming that we would see implemented. So we did give them money. I forgot to mention that. Each school was given money, and it was based on an equitable formula, making sure that schools got what they needed. It wasn't necessarily they all got the same, they got what they needed based on a formula. And some of them, it was a breakfast program, others it was a lunch program or subsidies, others it was snacks. Some schools used the money to do food safety training. for their volunteers, because they couldn't do a program without their volunteers having food safety training. Some of them actually purchased a fridge or a stove or some kind of equipment because they didn't have any, or they had failing infrastructure that needed to be replaced. And so we helped guide them through that process as well. I'm also happy to announce that 100% of pilot schools are now offer initiatives which provide equitable access to food. So this was something that really struck all of us when we first started. We had anticipated about 30% of students needing school food program from food security statistics. When we talked to the schools and we did the initial assessments at each of the school, we got a little nervous because the schools had said it's probably going to be closer to 50. So we're talking about averages here. Some schools were saying 90%, some schools were saying 5% of their children come to school hungry. But on average, it was about 50% is what the schools felt. Now, this could be also because it was a COVID year, and COVID, as we know, had created a bit more barriers to food security for some children, but we actually had 70% access rates with our school food programming, which is great because we do want universal access, but it was a bit surprising for us to see so many children accessing school food programs. And so, we do have a lot more results to share. And because I only have a few minutes to present today, I'm just going to leave this with you to say we will be presenting this in more detail later in December. We have a tentative webinar scheduled for mid-December. So keep your eyes and ears open, and we'll be happy to answer lots of those really detailed questions. But essentially, we did get lots of testimonies from pilot schools. They really appreciated not just the money, but the support and the guidance and the sharing of stories amongst each other. We saw improvements in food literacy, nutrition, healthy eating. Sometimes they had a school food program, but there was maybe some nutrition lacking within it. So a breakfast program that only had granola bars and juice boxes. So really learning around how do we improve the nutrition within that breakfast program to allow for, more nutrition within the children access. So capacity building, we saw some really great examples of student leadership where the students were actually doing and serving the school breakfast programs, knowledge sharing, and of course, volunteer engagement. And so I'll leave you with our main findings, which is that, providing crucial support to schools in developing, implementing, and delivering school food programs are individualized and address each school's specific needs was really the intention all along. And our findings show that school food programs have the opportunity to impact a large number of students, particularly when they are diverse and made accessible to all students. The Université de Moncton has 4 key recommendations out of their evaluation report. The first one being that provincial funds should be committed for school food programs. Equity in funding distribution is recommended based on the current landscape. That support from nutrition expertise is included, and that ongoing evaluation and monitoring be part of the school food program. And I will leave you with my information if anyone would like to contact me after. If your questions don't get answered, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
All right, okay. Again, thank you so much. Everybody's been very, very interested in hearing about this pilot, and we're happy, to hear what you presented, and looking forward to learning more in the future presentation. So thanks so much, Christine. I know it's been a journey, and really appreciate your sharing. So last but not least, we are moving it now a little more locally to the regional level, where we have Heather Stordy and Debbie McInnis going to speak with us. Heather Stordy is the Community Response Coordinator for the Anglophone East School District and works closely with the community to support youth. She has spent much of her career working either with or in the community. She is currently a board member of Atlantic Wellness, an agency that supports youth mental health. During the pandemic, she partnered with United Way to help lead a team bringing over 40,000 bag lunches to youth while they were not able to attend school, and continues to work on initiatives around food security for youth. We also have, so they're sharing the presentation, Debbie McInnis has been the CEO of the United Way of Greater Moncton and Southeastern NB region since October 2004. She was hired with a mandate to move the focus of the United Way to one of community impact, and has led a successful transformation of the United Way from being primarily a fundraising organization to one that focuses on community impact while maintaining fundraising as a core part of its foundation. Debbie is a member of the Greater Moncton Homelessness Steering Committee, Greater Moncton Literacy Advisory Board, Westmoreland Albert Community Inclusion Network, Rising Tide Community Initiative, and has volunteered for the Children's Wish Foundation for over 30 years. Debbie won CBCD's Phenomenal Woman Award in 2011, Woman of Distinction in 2015, and the Order of Moncton in 2020. So we welcome both Heather and Debbie to tell us more about what's been happening in the Moncton region.
Thank you so much. I am having a little difficulty pulling up my PowerPoint. I'm wondering if Jill is able to pop it on for us. Is that a possibility? It's a different version of Zoom than what I'm used to. I apologize.
Zoom keeps updating and it's a little challenging.
Yeah, it is.
Pros and cons, simpler before and able to do more now, but more challenging.
Sure. Is Jill available to do that, or?
So I'm wondering if our tech support are able to make Heather the host.
Yeah, that's probably what you need.
So who do we have on here for tech support?
Yep, I'm right here.
Oh, just a sec. I think maybe. Hang on. Can you folks see that?
Yeah.
There you go.
Awesome.
Excellent.
All right.
And Heather, we can still see.
So we're going to get to that reading view. There we go.
Perfect.
Yep.
All good. Wonderful. Okay. Thanks so much for having us. And Deb, if you wanted to start.
Okay. So it all started with a phone call, and that it did. I have to say that most of you would know, you're all involved in food and school food, that kids, benefit from breakfast programs, hot lunch programs, snack programs. And when the world stopped in the way that we know it on March 13th, 2020, all of those food programs stopped as well. So, with the United Way, we were immediately thrown into many community issues, but I went home and I really thought a lot about the kids and how they were going to access food. It's always been food insecurity has always been a concern of mine. So the next day on Saturday, I contacted Heather and I said, Heather, okay, I couldn't sleep last night. I'm worried about the kids and how are they going to access food? And Heather said, me too. And I'm just starting to work on a plan. And so it began.
Perfect. So we're going to reference a lot about what happened in 2020 during the pandemic, because it was pretty, it was a really large effort with a very small amount of folks. And, we'll talk about what's currently happening. But I think it was Christine that mentioned leveraging community. And that's really key to the process. So in 2020, in partnership with the United Way, Inspiration Cafe, our partners all came together, Moncton Head Start, Riverview Boys and Girls Club, Food Depot Alimentaire, ourselves, we teamed up and said, let's do a healthy bag lunch. Debbie and I spoke and said, okay, we need something that's going to be hearty enough that if they were only getting something really nutritious once a day, what could that look like? And we thought lunch, and we thought lots of protein and fruits and veggies and things like that could be hearty enough to sustain. So we were up to approximately 700 student bag lunches that were prepared and delivered each weekday. And by the end of the June, we had delivered 40,000 bag lunches.
So staff and volunteers, you know, we can't do anything at United Way without staff and volunteers. And the volunteer core group here was absolutely phenomenal. So we had 22 Anglophone East staff, Moncton High School, culinary teachers, Harrison Trimble, people from TESS, which is their therapeutic education support site, Forest Glen School, community schools, and we had their transportation as well. The United Way staff from the Inspiration Cafe, because the cafe was basically closed. The summer students who were fantastic. The Salvus Clinic, which is a frontline serving clinic here, serves the most vulnerable populations. Their staff helped. And then 5 U-turn strategic coordinators were involved with giving out lunches to the students they worked with all the time to help keep the connection. I think that's the other part that was so important, was allowing people to maintain a connection with the people they worked with, and the parents and kids to keep a connection with schools that are so important to them. So we had community busing. We had 3 staff from Riverview Boys and Girls Club, Moncton Boys and Girls Clubs, volunteer drivers from Head Start. We had Westmoreland Alberta Action involved, and Magma and Youth Impact both picked up the lunches and took them and delivered to their own clientele. Again, keeping that connection that was so hard, especially as we all know when the pandemic first struck. We had staff from the YWCA. They did their own drop-off site. We dropped off to them, and they supported the lunch delivery in Beechwood community, which is, for those of you who don't know, is a low-income area in Moncton. And that, again, connection, so important. So we also had retired teachers who stepped up. It takes a village, and it certainly took an entire community to make this happen.
So food preparation, I think it was key to understand at the time, everything was closed. There was nothing. There were no one on the streets. We were literally driving down the streets and there was nobody around. So our culinary tech teachers, who, as probably most of you on this call have worked with in some capacity, because they're most often helping and leading our school food efforts, our breakfast programs, hot lunch, and that kind of thing. They themselves connect with those youth on a daily basis. So they were the ones calling me saying, what can I do? What can I do to help? So we set up 4 locations that were prepping food. So we had Harrison Trimble. Then we had the Inspiration Cafe that Debbie referenced earlier, Moncton High. And then we had our therapeutic education support site downtown. So we would do our runs and go and pick up the lunches from them, and then we would distribute them after that. So again, it was these folks were every day. We'd figure out the numbers the night before of what we needed based on what we were seeing of folks coming. It wasn't a registration, it was a first come, first serve. So we kept having to sort of up the amount. So each night they would get this is how much we need for tomorrow kind of email. And every single one of them were like, yep, great, we're on it.
So delivery, we had small teams, as it says here, of staff, volunteers, and drivers who delivered during the lunch hour to priority neighborhoods. When we finished, there were approximately 19 stops, Moncton, Riverview, Salisbury, and Dieppe. We didn't start with that. As Heather said, it grew and it grew and it grew as people realized there was the availability of food. And we say here that the school sent voicemails and emails regarding pickup locations, but it sounds easy when you put it on a bunch of slides, but Heather spent many, many hours every evening figuring out where our additional stops would be. Should we have more sandwiches at one stop than another, and make sure the volunteers were in the right places? So it really was a huge undertaking to make sure it went well. But the other thing again about connection, I was out on one of the first deliveries, and we stopped at a little trailer park, and a woman came over with her 4 kids. And these kids were usually in school, shouldn't usually have to worry about 3 meals a day for 4 kids. They took advantage of school programs. They were enrolled in the Boys and Girls Club. But what she said to me was, I'm so glad to see you. I thought people had forgot about us. So again, that connection was huge. You could do you could do health checks on the kids and make sure they were okay. And if they weren't, you know, take whatever that appropriate action was. But again, the connection was hugely important.
For sure. And I just want to make mention, when we did all come together and celebrate this at the end, we did a few pieces of recognition. We have some plaques hanging in the kitchens that prepared that. So they'll always be able to look at that and remember the great work that they did individually as school folks. And then our volunteers, we gave them all a little rock star trophy, because we really felt that during the times, you'll see, you know, that those were times when we were being so incredibly careful and really staying small. So when we think about some of these large endeavors, sometimes it can work with smaller groups of people that are really dedicated and committed. And these folks certainly were at the time. And they took some risks, really, not knowing the unknown around COVID. Yeah. So over the summer of 2020, for about 10 weeks, families registered through the United Way, and we knew that we had to make a shift and end things at that point. And then what would we do? Because of course, we talk about capacity, we talk about funding and all of those things, and that it's really hard to sustain. So, but we knew that families would still be having a rough time. We knew that things weren't opening up to full capacity, so we wouldn't have youth centers opening in the way that they normally would be. And I think earlier on, we heard how, you know, we're still not back to COVID normal, pre-COVID normal, I should say. So we knew we had to do that. So 125 families received large bags of food each week. And we instructed folks to go to the closest drop-off. We had a couple of stations for that, and then those without transportation, because that's a lot of who we were taking care of at the time. We did outreach and drop off. So Deb, I realized that I jumped in on that slide, but
go ahead with your food programs. That's fine.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay.
We're sharing the load. Debbie and I have worked together for over 20 years, and we often share a brain. So currently what's happening in our schools right now, we made another shift after things started back up again in the fall of last year to say, okay, more of our programming will be coming back. So we really have a great partnership in the city of Moncton, in our surrounding area with Food Depot Alimentaire, the United Way, obviously. And we also have school-based donations, which are really key. Really, those local schools and the community work that they do is you know, goes without saying that they really sustain a lot of what we're doing, included in both volunteers and donations. Our hot lunch program is sporadic, but thanks to the Heart and Stroke last year, I know that some more lunch programs were able to be funded. And places like the Rotary and churches certainly help us out a lot. Snack programs, we have a collective that Debbie and I partner with our Anglophone East and Aubrey Kirkpatrick, and a few local community folks that help us out, Eric Jingles and Andrew Trites, and people that are just concerned about. It started around Ward 4, and we talk about poverty, and they have a 39% poverty rate here in the local area. So that was something that we want to be able to see, that at least some sustainable food happens throughout the day as well, if even if they can take some things home. Weekend food, Isthmus, which is formerly Blessings in a Backpack, are a really key partner in all of this. They're up to, I think, over 800 bags a week that they distribute to our local schools, and schools identify the need there. What we saw from then is, as you know, we went through provincially through a union strike. And again, kids were out of school. And we knew, even though it was only 2 weeks, we started to get a little concerned, you know, and Debbie and I had those conversations again. But what we started to see, which was wonderful, is schools really stepped up locally and started to design their own food programming and, you know, get outside and distribute some food. So teachers were involved, but Isthmus really, really stepped up and took this on and increased their capacity for the 2 weeks that the kids were at home. So we're starting to see where we build that capacity, and you build it and folks start to take it on and felt much more comfortable in doing so. So that was really a wonderful place to be in the 2 weeks when they were out. So I mentioned our pilot partnership last year, and thank you so much, because I know that we had, I think it was 5 schools who participated, and it was really beneficial for those schools and what they received. And we're really hoping that maybe this will continue.
Okay, I'm really cognizant of time. I think we're right at 12:40, but I just will give a quick shout out to funders. I think we all realize that nothing happens without money. I mean, that you have to have dollars to support any food program, and with the cost of food going up, we certainly want to support local. But Atlantic Compassion Fund, Emergency Community Support Fund, one provincial government and local donors, and the other federal, really did a lot for supporting these programs, along with the other people you see listed here: the Food Depot, Dan Martello is a local philanthropist, Isthmus Brewer Foundation, Bonte Foods, McBuns, DNA Swag, and then parents, schools, community members. People just stood up. They stood up and helped in any way they could. So thank you very much for having us. We're thrilled to be here.
All right. Again, thank you. And you're right, we are at 12:40, and we had one question, and it was more about kind of what non-school food initiatives. So hopeful that other sessions in the conference will address that question. For those of you who weren't able to participate in earlier sessions, Jill has left us with a last question, so you're not quite off the hook yet and ready for lunch. What I would like to ask you, each person, is to as a summary point, what would you like people here to get loud about food? And I'm just going to plant a tiny seed, since you have 40-some people here. Is there something that you would like people on the presentation to do around promoting the school food program in New Brunswick and or at the national level? But you don't have to. So what would you like people to be loud about food? We'll go back to the circle round to the beginning. So Debbie, loud about food, what would you like people here to think about?
Using all the amazing creativity that we've heard about from the last presentation and all of our presentations to create a stronger movement in New Brunswick for school food across the province.
Okay, great, thank you. Jessie.
Yeah, I would build on that, what Debbie said, and I think just ensuring integration of all of these pieces together. So working on the food programs, but also ensuring that that's embedded within the curriculum and there's opportunities for students to connect, and then also the community connection so that we're also supporting the local economy.
All right, look at this, so right on the spot, just these wonderful thoughts. Christine.
Well, Mary, in addition to what Debbie and Jessie just mentioned, I think for us, it's really important that we really push for funding to be made available for schools. So if for us at Heart and Stroke, we really want all of the stakeholders to get behind that message that this needs to happen today and that we are going to work tirelessly to make it happen.
Okay, and that may be something that comes up again in the December talk about how that might happen. I'm not.
Yeah, well, we do have an advocacy strategy going on, and anyone who wants to participate in that with us, please connect. But certainly it will be more to talk about all the details from the results of the pilot project.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and so we have Heather and Debbie. So we'll say Heather. Heather, go ahead.
Sure. To echo what everyone is saying, advocacy is key. And that's, I think the most important thing is even provincially, if we can benefit from having funding, programming, someone who's assigned to this effort. I've been saying that for a while, that if we have someone in charge of school food, I think that would be a benefit if we can advocate provincially for someone like that.
All right, let's hope there's some provincial people on this who are listening. All right, okay, and so we're bookending with another Debbie. So last word to you, Debbie.
I guess I just agree with what everyone said, and advocacy is so essential. And I think if everyone is pedaling in the same direction, I think that's important, that we have a united message, and it's not, you know, because often you'll hear that people say, well, I don't really know, there's all these different messages. So if we can figure out how we're going to work together and ask for the same thing, I think that's vitally important. So, and again, I'll go back to funding. We have to have funding, and it shouldn't be in dribs and drabs. It should be a real program that's funded adequately.
Wonderful. And just so that you all know, that New Brunswick is the last province to commit to funding school food. So it's not as though we're asking for something that others haven't received. We are the last, but hopefully not the least. Thank you so much. I really appreciate too all of those who have been listening. We're doing this over the lunch hour. We're talking about school food. I don't know about you, but I am hungry. So thanks to our speakers and to everyone. And I'm going to pass it back to Jill.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for your excellent moderation. Mary McKenna, Food for All's researcher and resident on school food. I just wanted to say that in celebration, because Mary brings so much experience and knowledge to this work. So Mary, actually, before we go, what do you want to get loud about?
I think all said it well. Yeah, I think it's time to, and I'm very happy to hear Christine. I was interviewed not that long ago about saying, you know, like, come on, government, this was promised in the 2020 budget. And then somebody pointed out, well, at least this government has you know, stepped up and been the first one to say, let's do it. But it's like, okay, but now let's do it. So I think that's the case. And it will be, I mean, I did post the information on the article. School food at one level is super simple, right? We're giving food to kids in schools, but it's very complicated, and we all know that. So there has to be, I'm really happy to hear what others have said around, basically it's about respecting and recognizing differences and figuring out a way to work together. So I think that's key.
That's right. There are many solutions. Thank you so much, Mary. And like you said, I'm sure everybody is getting hungry. I am really hungry. And so we'll be moving into our lunch hour now before we have one more session at the end of the day. We are going to be opening up breakout rooms in our lunchroom so that if you wish, there is no pressure, but if you wish, you can join into the lunch session. You can see who's in there and have some informal conversations. We'll allow you to self-organize yourselves in that way. And so again, over to the lobby, if you'd like to click on the lunch session, please feel free to do so. You can also pause, go for lunch, and then we'll meet back here if you're coming back for the Indigenous food knowledge and food systems conversation this afternoon at 1:45. Thank you so much to all our speakers. This conference is better because of all of you. So thanks again. We'll see y'all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.